Hey guys, and welcome to the second video in this mini-series looking at logging in Python 3. In the first video, we looked at the basics of logging, so we looked at the logging levels, so all the way from debug, which is your super low-level stuff, all the way up to info, which is kind of reporting on all of the mundane stuff that may happen in your program. We also looked at logging to the terminal, so for example, if you were to run this guy here, this would log straight to the terminal, and we can prove that. We run Python 3 main.py, which is our file here. We can see that we've configured our logging to log for the debug level, which will basically pick up everything. And then inside my kind of, not particularly useful function, we are saying logging.debug, hey look, we called the func. And then of course when we call the function, this invokes the logging statement, and then yeah, we can see it down here, which is completely fine. We can also log to file as well, so if I was to run this second basic config here, this would do exactly the same thing. However, it would then put my logging statement into a file called log.out. Now in this video, I want to take a look at how you can make this distinction between the console and the file a whole lot better and more relative to what we would do in the industry. Now in work, what we would tend to do, and this is pretty good practice in a number of places, I would believe, is we tend to log to the console and also log to the file as well. So depending on kind of what's happening in your code, you're going to want to log to both, but we want to log different things to each place. So let me give you an idea of the benefits of this. So suppose you've got a program running along, and perhaps this program is running 24/7. Now, if you were to log absolutely everything to the console, trying to do any kind of debugging in the console would be a right pain. You would have so much stuff to look at. The log files would be, that logging space in the terminal, to speak, would go on forever and ever, and it'll be a pain. Same as like logging to the file. If you did everything to the file as well, again, a bit of a pain. So what we tend to do is to log the really important stuff to the console, and then keep all of the debug stuff, or you can do everything else, into its own specific log file. In the next video, we're going to look at how you do a rotating log file, so it saves you a bit of memory. But in this video, I want to look at how you would basically achieve that. So we'll set up some really smart logging. We'll basically say only the info stuff, make that go to the console. I mean, it can be anything. You can say do like the warnings, the errors, the criticals, and the infos to the console, and do the debugs, and then everything else above to file. So basically means we're kind of keeping our logs in two places. All the important stuff in the console, everything else can then go in the log file. The idea for that is your general kind of everyday running of the program, you can just look in the console to see what's going on, but on the off chance that something untoward happens, yeah, you can go then take a look at your log file and look at the more detailed logs in there. So to get this started, I'm going to clear the screen and I'm going to show you how to set this up from scratch. So the first thing we're going to do is set up a logger. So if I say logger is equal to logging.getLogger here, and we can then give our logger a name. I'm just going to call it my logger, but you can call this whatever you want here. Now the next thing I want to do, which I'm going to write down here, is to add a handler. And these handlers are going to be really important. We have one called the file handler, and we have one called the stream handler. This guy is going to log to your file. This guy here is going to log to the standard out or a stream, which is basically the console. So we'll go ahead and do that here. So let's say file logger. Again, I'll try and keep the variable names as sort of simple as possible. And these are both available inside this logging module here. So I'll do logging.file handler. You can see here this requires a file name. So let's just do, we'll do mylogger.out. Okay. And we then want to then set, so for this particular handler, we want to set a level to which it's going to log to. So we can then do file logger dot set level there. And then we'll do logging dot debug like that. Now the next thing we want to do is set up our stream handler. Kind of the same deal really. Let's call this console logger is equal to logging dot, and this is this guy here, stream handler. It doesn't take any arguments for now, this one. No, that's fine. And then just like how we set this one equal to logging.debug, we're going to say this guy can take care of all of the info statements and above. So we'll do console logger, set level, and let's do logging.info. Here we are. So I'm going to quickly comment these. So this is, this guy's going to be add the file handler, and then this guy here, we add, I know it says stream handler, but I'm going to call it the console. It's a bit more relevant, so to speak. So let's just pause there for a second. We define our logger object here, and we've then defined a handler for the files, and then defined a handler for our console here. To be honest, you could just say, let's stop here, add our two handlers to the main logger, and then we're done with it. But we can also add formatting as well. So I think we'll do the formatting, and then we'll take our two handlers and then apply those to our main logger class here. Now I'm going to pinch this from my previous video. I'm going to put this here. So this is my logging.formatter, and to be honest, this is pretty standard. It does the ASCII time, the name, the level, and then the message here. And to be honest, we can do this for both. It just keeps it consistent. So you can see the time of the log, the level of the log, and then finally a message. And then all we do is basically take this formatter. So I'm going to do define formatter. And then all we're then going to do is say, take this formatter and apply it to this, and apply it to this here. So let's do the file logger first. Set formatter, and then we can do the same thing for the console as well. So console logger dot set formatter, and formatter in here. Can I just quickly run this, check there's no errors, and there's not. So this is defining formatter and applying to, let's say, our two handlers. And there we go. Now the last step is to basically say, take this and apply it as a handler to this here. And that's really simple. I'll do the code first and then we'll write the comments after. So we'll do logger dot add handler, it's this guy, and we're going to add file logger here. Let's then repeat this line. I can just copy and paste, and then we'll do console logger here. And here we are adding handlers to our logger. And there we have it. So let's just recap right from the top. First step, we define our logger here, and we then define a handler for our file output. We then define a handler for our console output. We then define a format upon which we want the logs to appear. So time, name, the level of the log. So like, error, critical, warning, info, whatever. Followed by the message actually being logged. We took that formatter and said, give it to the file logger and the console logger, and then finally we added the handler to our main logger, which we defined earlier up here. What we'll do now is just do a couple of kind of test runs in this here, and then in practice you're never really going to have all this at the top of your code. We might want to kind of encapsulate this and put this into its own function inside a separate file, and then just import it into our file. So we'll do a couple of test runs, just make sure that we're all up and running, and then we'll begin the process of putting this in a separate file, just so it's got somewhere else to live. Now, if we're expecting to do some logging in this file, of course, as I alluded to earlier, we're not actually going to keep this all here. But what we do want to do is set a level upon which logging is going to happen. So, of course, at the start of the video, we did like logger.basicconfig, level equals blah, 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 and so on. What we can do is just do logger.setLevel, and then we can do level equals logging.debug. And of course, debug is like the lowest level we can log at. That means that we're going to catch everything. So just say, for example, if I just did def, my func will define some arbitrary function down here at the bottom, and then I can do logger dot, let's do info here like this, and say info message, just like that. And now let's call our function. Hit run. Okay, and we see my logger info message. So just to bear in mind, see that format there? That's where that formatter comes in. So because we applied this formatter into both our file logger and our console logger, see, there we go. It's ASCII time, the name of the logger, my logger, the level name, info, and then the message, info message. Let me just try something else. Let's just do logger.debug here, and this is where I think that having the two handlers really kind of comes into play. If I do debug message, clear the screen for a second, and hit run. So we said logging.debug is the logging level for this entire file, but why didn't that debug message appear? Well, that's because of the handler. Because we've said the console handler is only going to log the info level and up. However, the file handler, that can take the debug messages and up. So if we check out mylogger.out, where are you? There you are. There we go. So that means that our debug messages are getting routed into here. So if we run a few more times, there we go. See how that's getting the info and the debug each time? That's because of this here. And then the console handler, that's only getting the info and above. Of course, if we were to change this and say, right, okay, now the console can do the same thing, then yeah, it can. But in general, yeah, you're probably going to want to not do that. So I want to kind of really hit that home just for a second. Let's pause there. So we're saying only kind of like the nice kind of friendly logs. So anything that's like generic information. So you could choose to bring this lower down to say like, okay, do the warnings or whatever. But in practice, you might kind of have these log.info statements dotted around your code to say, here's when key stuff is happening. And then we can just see that in the console to give us kind of clarity that, yeah, the program's running as it should. I can see it in the terminal. But all of like the low level behind the scenes stuff, we are keeping track of that. We're just not showing it to the stream. We're showing it to the file because we created our own file handler and said, you can take care of all the debug stuff. So if you did want to go behind the scenes and check out what's happening, just open your file and all the debug stuff is there. What I'll do now is kind of get rid of this, and I want to show you how you can kind of encapsulate all this away into its own kind of nice function in its own separate module, and we'll then import it and make a little bit of a mini program to see what we can do. So the first thing I've done, I've just got an empty file called customloggers.py, and this is in the same directory as main.py. This is purely just for ease of importing, if I'm honest. And then what we can do is we can take all of this and bring it into here like this. And then you can really get kind of granular with this. We could put the whole thing in one big function, return the logger, and then import said logger into here. So we'll start with that. We're going to say def my logger like this. And all we're simply going to do for kind of level 1 of this is do all of this, and at the end just do return logger here. Now no function is complete without this, so we'll say a function to define a multi-output logger like this. And you could, if you wanted to, get really kind of particular. This logging object here, if I just quickly do show you what this actually is. If I take this and put it here like that, and just do print logger for a second, we can see what type it belongs to. So it's logger, my logger here. So what you actually could do is do this here, like that. Just so this is basically just to give it a type in to say this function takes in nothing, but it does return a logger object here. Of course, completely optional, but I always quite like adding these type ins in to actually say, here's what this function is taking, here's what this function is giving back. So that's all done, and we are returning our logger here. So what we can do, and you could either define this in main or define it here. So what I'll do logger is equal to my logger like this, and call that down here. So that now means that in main, I can do the following. So let's remove this for a second, and we can then do from custom loggers import logger like this. So let's just quickly pause there for a second. So this function has defined a logging object with the two handlers, all formatted, and those handlers have been added to that logger object here. At the bottom, we've defined a variable called logger, which has called that function, and of course that function's return the logger to this variable. Okay, so with our logging variable defined in customloggers.py, the next step is to actually go ahead and use it. So in main.py, just to bear in mind these are both in the same directory here, so I can simply do from custom loggers import logger here, and this logger name, of course, this corresponds to this variable here, and we can use it just as we did before. So if I was to say logger.info, this is my info message, and then we go ahead and hit run. There we go, we see that exact same formatting here, and we see it appearing in the console because of our stream handler, and of course it's also appeared in mylogger.out. There we go, just the same as that. We'll go ahead and quickly pinch this and put it underneath, but this time we'll switch our info to debug, and we'll do, this is my debug message. Hit run again, and yeah, so see how debug didn't show in here? Of course that's because of our custom logger, but it should appear in here. So of course I look at the difference between that. So previously we had all of this at the top of our file. However, we can just get away with putting it into its own function, making it return the logger with all the setup happening in between like this. All we got to then do is call the function, which then returns the logger, import that into your main script like this, and just do your logger.info.debug.error warning critical, whatever you want to do, which is, in my opinion, a whole lot neater, especially if you've got a fairly sizable code base. Putting your logger into a separate file in separate functions just makes things a lot neater. So for this next part of the video, I want to make this a bit more granular. Now, if you're a proper Python purist, you may have heard of the SRP, which is the single responsibility principle. Actually, to be honest, that's kind of in programming in general, really, not just Python. And it's the idea that a function should have a single role or single responsibility. And this one really doesn't. It's defining a logger, it's adding these handlers to it as well. So you want to try and do our best so that this function is keeping it as simple as possible. So what I might try and do is take away these file handlers into separate functions with the formatting as well, and then applying them at the end as well. So if we do def, let's keep it snake case, keep it consistent like this here. We'll do this here for now. We'll worry about the type hints in just a second. So we'll do define and return a file handler like this. So what I want to do is basically take these guys out just for a minute, get rid of this here, and I can actually take away these two for now as well. We could further log this and make it a bit fancier as well, and at the end we'll then do return file logger here. Now if I take this guy, file logger, actually it's kind of the same, this works. So let's remove the comments, make it a bit nicer. So rather than defining the file logger and doing its formatting and adding it in here, we can simply say call this function file logger, and yeah, this function is setting up that file handler, its level, its formatting, setting up this as well, and then returning it here, which is pretty good. So I want to make sure I get the file logger removed from there as well, and if I just go ahead and quickly hit run, that looks like it's good. Let's check the logger.out, and that's done it at the right time, which is what we want. Perfect. So let's see if we can figure this out. This is it's returning a file handler, so that means we can do logging dot file handler like this. And now, to be honest, we can pretty much copy this and do it the same for the other guy as well. Console logger here. This is also going to be returning not a file handler, a stream handler, just like that. And we'll be good and do sort of the same thing. Actually, you know what? Just for the sake of time, we'll do this here: define and return a stream handler. Now we can take off, let's see, these four. Yeah, that will do. Let's make this all look nice and fancy. Got a duplicated line here, we can deal with that in just a second. And then finally we can get rid of that space. Do return console logger down here. One space between all of our functions. Bring this all up, and this is like that here. And to me, that's a whole lot nicer. So in this, it's still not fully 100% purely single responsibility, but it's a lot of the way there. We've defined a logger, we've added some handlers, and returned it. And that's it. So we're going to hit run one more time, check that works, and it looks like it does. Has it gone to file? Let's just quickly remove that for a second. Hit run. $22.58. I'm sorry, I'm just checking the time on my system clock there. Yeah, they've both gone in absolutely fine here. So yeah, and I think in practice I'd be much more likely to do this here. The only thing I don't quite like is the fact that we've repeated this line twice. So we can pinch this out here, and if we do, we'll call this my formatter like this here. So that just means we can pinch this, because we've defined this above all the functions. We can do my formatter, and then, yeah, that's a little bit neater. Check that again for no errors just by running it. If we just pause there for a second, let's just see what we can do. So we have a separate function just for our file handler. So if we want to change anything about the way we're logging to file, well, we can just come in here, we can change the file name, we can change its logging level. Same for our stream handler, we can change its logging level here. You could redefine the formatter, make it different. And then this guy here, it's just tying it all together. And finally, we call the function, which is then being imported into main.py. And then that's it, you can use it however you like. So what I'd like to end on for this video is just building a simple function that goes off and calls an API. And then we're going to kind of dot in some info and some debug and possibly an error message. And then we'll just kind of observe how it's logging to the stream console here versus how it's logging to our file. So I'll get this cleared up and we'll give that a go. So we're using the request module to make a simple get request to this URL. I've used this in previous videos. This is actually a really kind of nice free site. You can use it to kind of practice your requests on, which is pretty nice. If this comes back as having a status code of 200, meaning OK, we'll print off the response data and then just print off the headers here. The else is going to come along, of course, if this is not 200. So if we run it without any logging at all, we've got our print statements here, and that's absolutely fine. But just want to show you like how you would possibly integrate some of our logging into this. So of course, we don't want, you can keep the prints, that's totally fine. But what we can do is start off with an info here. And now you do this similar to an F string, except it's best to use a string interpolation, which is like this S here. So we can say requesting from this, and then inside this statement here, if we were to pass in URL and clear the screen and run, there we go, requesting from this here. So let's just put a few of these around. Let's just do, rather than do data headers, we could do logger.info here. Let's put that in. We'll log the headers. There's our headers, so we'll just run that again. And then it would be nice if we could handle this in a different way. So let's get rid of this guy here, and we'll do let's do logger.error. So we can say request failed. We got we got a code of, and then we can do the same thing. And then we're looking for response.status code here. There we go. Nice and simple. Clear the screen and hit run. So let's make this hopefully fail. Hopefully that's not like a real site. Okay, and we've got an error, which is pretty cool. So basically it couldn't get through to this. So what we could do is wrap this up. So why don't we try the following here? Let's bring this down, and then we'll do the following here. We'll say try. It's a good kind of use case. I'm kind of glad that failed. And we'll do accept. And then what we'll do here, we'll do accept exception. This would be kind of like a catch-all then. And then we can do logger dot, let's try critical, get really serious. We could say something awful happened. A bit dramatic, I know, but just kind of get the point of this logging happening here. We'll say something awful happened. And then into here, we'll do exe, like that. And then what we could do is do, let's say, Actually, what we'll do, we can then put an else here, and then put this inside here. So because this is inside the else, of course, like if this try goes through and it's fine, we jump down to the else and then examine the status code. However, if this doesn't happen correctly, we jump into this exception and we log a critical. So let's see what we get. Critical, something awful happened. Bit dramatic, but yeah, there we go. And we can see what's happened there. So it didn't like connecting to that URL, apparently, but yeah, good to know. Let's reset it back to something it's happy with. And that looks good. Requesting from this, we can see this happened here, and that will also be in our log file as well. This is a fairly small example, but it's just something I want to highlight. You know, the whole point of this video has been to show how we can do these different log handlers here. And then in our main program, it's as simple as just importing it, and then log.info.critical.error.debug, whatever you want, you know, it's going to log to wherever your handlers have said. But yeah, we'll round off the video here. And in the next session, I want to take a look at rotating log handlers. Cheers for watching, guys, and see you all in the next session.